Welcome to Sampstra Games, the place to find new strategy games, and we are back! The guides are back! And we are going to continue with Advanced Antwerp, which is probably the most difficult mission we've had so far. Or maybe I just didn't have as much time for it as usual. But enough chit-chatting, let's go to the tactics window and just talk about it. Alright, so the most difficult part here is, as the name suggests, Antwerpen, which is right here. So this is where we need to get. Now the problem is you only have 7 turns and you're going to have a lot of problem with supply. So in order to get to there, you need to control this supply railway so that the people that can get there are connected. Now this is going to be a fairly difficult task. Let me show why. So over here you have a river. Now this is actually pretty great because if you destroy the bridges, the bridge here and the bridge here, then in order for the people to get to the supply, to sort of break your supply, they have to be standing on the edge here, and then they have to take their entire turn to move over, so you can usually kill them before that. So you want to destroy those 2 bridges. In most cases, the enemy actually destroys the bridges for you, especially this one. So you don't actually have to do it, you just need to watch out that they do it. Now the problem comes from this position onward, because here there are no rivers. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to keep your units fairly close to each other so they can hold on to the supply. But you also can't take too long because you don't have many turns in Antwerp. So what usually happens is that they will cut your supply at least once or twice. That's okay. Make sure that you place your US HQ right here on this hex, ideally, or somewhere near this area, but so that it's still under the river so that they can get to it. And then even if they cut off your supply here, what you will do is you will kill the unit that's standing there and then use the resupply option from your HQ once your area is connected. Then you get to Antwerp. So this is your main focus. You need to use your US HQ for this. Your US HQ is going to go main on the supply. The British HQ is going to be in this general area. It's going to help with the US, but it will also kind of hold against sort of enemies that are somewhere here. So it's going to hold them off and kind of keep the zone of control a bit wider than you would normally. And your Canadians don't do much of anything. Your Canadians are going to move here to Le Havre and then very slowly in this direction. They're mostly just standing around doing nothing. So around turn 7, you should be able to control Antwerp and Le Havre, and that's it. At that point, you will grab some infantry or tank unit and run towards clear the sheet. Now, because this is a fairly difficult terrain, it will probably take you 2 turns, so you should just about get clear the shield on turn 9. Now, at the same moment, so we're still on turn 7. Now, then you're going to grab your Canadians and you're going to move towards Boulogne and Calnis. You're probably going to have some British units that are going to help over here, and you're going to try to take over this place. Make sure that you repair this bridge that they've probably broken, and then maybe this one as well, and you start advancing in that direction. You do not want to move your British HQ there. Now let me switch the map so I can show you what the US and the British HQ are going to be doing at this point. Okay? Alright, so we've got the other map so we can see the other areas. Now remember that at this point we already have Antwerp, Clear the Sheet, and Le Havre. I'll show it to you over here as well. And the Canadians are moving towards this area, so that should be covered. Now you're going to take your US army. You don't need to take the whole army, just take like a couple tanks and couple infantry, and you're gonna run towards Leech and I mean run. You want to ideally move over this supply that's actually here so that they're supplied, and you need to attack Leech and again they both have to be done on turn 10, so you need to really hurry to make sure that you can get them both. You also want to move your US HQ somewhere in this area so that you can use its abilities. Then you want to take your British HQ and you want to move through this supply, or like in generally wherever your units are in this direction towards Luxembourg. You have 1 extra turn for that, so you're going to have a little bit more time. You need to grab your British HQ and you need to move it close enough so that they can use the abilities. You will not need the abilities up here. That's fine, you're probably going to have some British units there as well, but you don't need those. Okay, so then you are done. Alright, so let's jump into it. Welcome back from the tactics window. And off we go. So first we're going to start by attacking the tank there, and then we're going to be using a little bit of a trick which I will explain to you in a second. But first let me just add some armor steps to my units. Now we're going to be using a trick. We're going to be moving the tank near the enemy tank, which essentially means that I'm gaining the zone of control. And once I have the zone of control, I will be able to move my units there and sort of like bypass the tank, which you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. This is actually a pretty cool trick. I'm also going to be using the mobility ability to increase the movement of the unit. Now it's important that the unit is placed on one side of the bridge, and because that way the enemy cannot destroy the bridge, which is very useful. Now then I'm using some of my abilities to actually attack the tank itself, because the problem with the tank is if you don't kill it or you don't get rid of it, it can step on your supply line and take away your supply. So that's why it's actually important that you fight it, even though it's going to be unsupplied right now during its next turn, because it could kind of cause a mess. Then I'm adding some deployable units that I had, just kind of placing them there. Now after this I'm going to be attacking on the units that are kind of here in the main area. Here you want to focus on getting like 0, 1, 0, 3 and taking control of the supply lines. Now while we're doing that, let me talk to you a little bit about the roles of different HQs in this particular map. So the US has one main task in mind, and that's going to Antwerp, as I explained in the tactics window. The Canadians, they're mostly just kind of standing back. They're going to be strong here where we're going to be attacking the units, but otherwise they mostly hold back and take over Le Havre until you can take Antwerpen, and then they sort of start pushing forward. And the British are kind of all over the place. They sort of have to do essentially everything except Antwerp and Le Havre, because you have some units up and some units down. You kind of want to control sort of like a pass between like the cities in the north and the Antwerpen line where the US are. So that's kind of where the British are. They're mostly helping so that the enemies don't control the supply that the US needs. Now here, at these guys in the city, it's actually pretty difficult to kill them, so we're going to be using a lot of paint from the Canadian HQ and some from the British HQ, and when all of their units are suppressed, then we can actually start attacking them and killing them off, which is what we're doing right now. And then you can move in. Now at this point, we're kind of controlling the supply, which is going to be important later. And yeah, then we're just kind of moving around trying to control some of the supply, using some abilities where we can. I didn't want to do like the 1-2, but just trying to figure out if there's like a better way to do it, but I didn't really have any other optional attacks. So I just kind of stepped around the enemy and that's it. Alright, then I'm checking my supplies, so we seem to be pretty well supplied everywhere, so I'm trying to take away some supplies because you don't actually have too many on this map. So this map is really about focusing, making sure that you control the supply where you can. Now there's this hex that I have the mouse on right now that ideally I would like to control. Unfortunately, I don't have it. It would be good if you could have it, but we can just take it next time. It's not that bad. And here I've added some supplies to make sure that the unit up front is supplied. This is not completely necessary, but you're going to have a lot of times where the enemy is going to cut off your supply, so you want to make sure that your units are as supplied as possible. Now the enemy is retreating towards Le Havre and Liège, which is perfectly fine. And you can see that the units around the railroad towards Antwerp are already on supply, and they destroyed that bridge. That was really important because now you don't have to destroy it. You want to get rid of the bridge either way, so this was quite helpful. Now remember, you need to run toward Antwerp. You don't really have time to sort of stand around. You need to place a unit on the hex where it is right now, because that way they cannot destroy the bridge. And you care about the bridge sort of forward towards Antwerp. The bridge towards Amiens, that could be destroyed. You don't care about that. Now here what I'm trying to do is I'm using my recon to find where the tank is and getting towards it, because as I explained before, I forgot to talk slow, I'm sorry, is you need to destroy the tank, otherwise it can step on your supply and destroy it. So you want to make sure that you try to kill it where you can. Here you can see I'm repairing the bridge forward towards Antwerp. And I'm trying to move my units, mostly the US units and maybe some British units, so that we can kind of stand on the supply and make sure that they can destroy it. And then I'm removing some of the supplies here because they're not necessary anymore. And I'm always, when I'm kind of picking a unit now, I'm just kind of looking where it belongs to and trying to place it towards the place where I want to have them. So the US on the railway, the British kind of in between, and the Canadian, we want to keep them up top. Ideally, focusing on Le Havre and on kind of killing off the enemy units on in the north. So, and when I say north, I mean like screen top. And we're moving the Canadian units forward. There's really nothing that interesting. Like I said, the Canadians essentially just kind of fall back. They're like talking to, so you know what? They just let the US and the British handle it. We're just gonna stand around and do nothing. That's what they do most of this mission. There's really no point in trying to push them somewhere else, I feel, because it would take forever to get them there, and then you would need them up anyway. So I'm just like using them very sparingly in this particular mission. Alright, we're adding some deployable units. And now we're starting to move the HQs. So I'm moving my British HQ closer towards Paris. And I'm adding some supply hubs towards the Canadian units upwards, because as we're pushing up, they actually don't have a supply there. Hitting some of the units here. Or we do have the airstrikes, so I'm trying to hit any kind of units that I can see, essentially. Alright, that's it for the turn. The enemy's trying to push forward, which is a bit unfortunate. So see, this is where they cut off my supply line. I think like there's probably a way you could do this mission without them ever cutting your supply, but it's very difficult, and it's honestly really irritating to just like spend hours checking the supply, like, oh my god, is this spot where they can get. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. It will happen. You're gonna have to deal with it when it happens, just like I'm gonna deal with it right now. You just have to, yeah. It will happen probably a few times, so you want to make sure that when you can, your units are as supplied as possible, and you want to make sure that your US HQ is not the one that gets out of supply, because if that happens, then that's a problem, because you cannot use the resupply and things like that. But if it doesn't happen, then you can just like kill off the enemy, and then once the zone of control is connected again, then you can use your ability. So we could have used the resupply. Essentially, I've decided not to. Instead, I'm using the increasing movement of my infantry to sort of push them forward a bit faster, because we're going to need them at Antwerp and fast. And since we should now control the supply, we should be okay with the units over there. I try to make sure I always have somebody on Paris, because if you don't, the enemy tends to be kind of tempted by trying to get there. And I'm resupplying some units of the British army, and because they are in an area where it's unsupplied, so you want to make sure that the British HQ is kind of resupplying them where you can. And then here I'm trying to figure out how to push forward, or how to kind of move over the bridges towards Le Havre and Dieppe, so that we can kind of start doing stuff over there. Mostly Le Havre at the moment is kind of like your only focus, and you try to get over the water, which takes a few turns considering how many units you have. So yeah, it's just like very slowly pushing forward. Some of the tanks are moving around because it's faster, and the infantry is just moving slowly upwards. And I'm using some like feint attack, different abilities on the people in Le Havre, though it's not very interesting at the moment. And I'm kind of checking where I could use my airstrikes. Ideally, want to use them to help the US army, not necessarily the Canadian one like I just did. But I didn't have anywhere else to use that tax. So I was like, I just gotta use it somewhere, right? So I placed a supply hub there to give supply to my units, and that's essentially about it. So we're gonna move towards the next tab. Now I'm moving the US HQ. It's important to move it where I did, because it's still protected by the river, so the enemy should not step on it. If you move it further ahead, you might sort of cut it off, and you need to make sure that at least the HQ is in supply so that it can resupply the units that get cut off. And now the enemy again cut off my supply. Again, like I said, you probably could make sure that they don't, but I don't really want to spend like 20 minutes, you know, like in every single turn. And I also feel like if you're going to be replaying this, you're probably going to make mistakes like I am. So I want to kind of show off how you can handle it instead of, you know, just like doing it like a perfect round and then you're going to be, well, how I can't do that. Like I made a mistake. Like, is it over now? You know, so just like, so that's why I'm kind of showing it off to you, even though it's maybe not perfect. So we couldn't get any good odds, so we used the airstrike. Now at this point I'm using the trick I told you, which is essentially using the supply hub to increase the supply on my tank. So we killed off the tank and now we're kind of standing there trying to protect ourselves from the other tanks. In the meantime, I'm trying to move some of my other units forward, so we can get towards Antwerp as fast as possible. Also going to use the British units to kind of help and protect against the tanks, and I took over their supply on Amiens because I could. And unfortunately I have a tank that would do a nice damage, but I can't get to the position where I need, so I'm just kind of moving it nearby. That's about it. Also make sure that your units that are kind of somewhat unsupplied are stepping on the railroad so they will get supply next turn. And also remember the trick that if you have a clear hex next to a railway, it will be supplied. So you don't always need to stand on the railway exactly. You could stand like a 1 hex away. If the hex is clear, your unit will still be fully supplied. And here I'm moving my British kind of around. I'm trying to control like the general area, making sure that the enemies can sort of step onto me or something. And here we're trying to again take over their supply in Rowan, and we're gonna focus here on Le Havre. Again, use some abilities like Feint Attack and step back, and then use all sort of attack that we can. Another Feint Attack. Using some airstrikes that didn't do much. More Feint Attack. And finally with the engineers we can actually do some pretty nice damage. Now they were supposed to retreat but they're cornered, so they lost all of their steps. So next turn we should be able to finish them off, even if they get some resupply, because they're always supplied. You can't unsupply them, unfortunately, but it's okay. I'm sort of checking my supply, making sure that the units that are out of supply will be supplied again. And I'm moving out of Paris because we do kind of control the area around it, so we don't have to worry about an enemy stepping into it. And we left the HQ unprotected, and the hex there, which is a little risky, but remember the HQ increases movement points required to get to the position, so they shouldn't be able to get there. We also have a lot of zone of control around it, so they shouldn't be able to step into it anyways. Which is exactly. Again, they cut off your supply, which we're kind of used to at this point. Not a big deal. Kill off the thing that's destroying your supply and then resupply with your HQ if required. Now I've connected it, and now we can resupply this unit and the tank as well. Actually, we don't have enough to resupply the tank, but that's okay. We're gonna move forwards towards unfortunately we get stuck here with Brasso. That's fine. We're gonna be using some of our abilities like airstrikes to make sure that we can finish them off. Or more specifically to make sure that we can kind of move a little bit forward. Now destroy that other unit there was kind of standing in the way, and I'm keep pushing towards Antwerp. It's really important. Like I said, you don't have many turns to spare, so you kind of have to hurry quite significantly. Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that I control the entire supply from Amiens towards my US HQ. And over here with the other units, I'm just kind of pushing forward and killing off enemy units where I can. It's gonna be useful later where we wanna attack the cities up here. But right now we're supplying some of the British units and then we're moving the British HQ forward. And so with the US. I'm removing the supply ups I don't need because we want to make sure that we can move them later towards Antwerp to where we're gonna need them. And here we're just kind of moving around. Like I said, this part isn't that important at the moment. You want to push towards Boulogne so that you can later on attack there, but and try to control the supply if you can, but it's not that important. The Canadian, as always, don't do much of anything. They are going to control Le Havre, but considering how big of an army it is, it's kind of like they aren't really trying very hard. Then we'll move forwards towards Dieppe and again kill off the enemies and just kind of push towards Boulogne a little bit. Try to get over this river with the rest of the units and, you know, just get things moving. But really, they're just kind of standing around mostly, not doing much. Also removing this supply as they're not gonna need it. There's that one unit that needs it this turn, so I actually left it, but you could have already removed it. The unit will move next turn somewhere where it can actually do stuff, so you could remove it, doesn't matter. Right, that's it for this turn. Alright, we gotta focus on getting through Brussels and towards Antwerp because we only have 2 turns. We have this turn and 1 more turn, so like we really gotta hard. We're gonna move with our tank and attack the people in Brussels. Push them away, that's pretty good. And we're gonna use some airstrike so that we can do some better damage. Now, you need to control the railway, so remember that to get towards Antwerp. Well, actually, you don't need it to get there, but you want to make sure that your units will be supplied, so you do want to kill the people in Brussels, even though it's not an objective that you kind of worry about or something. Also, keep in mind the tank in Gent, because it could kind of cut off your supply, so you want to make sure that you use your zone of control to ideally stop it. If possible. Now, with the step that the enemy did, they actually cut off our supply over here. So a lot of our units are going to be unsupplied. It's not really a big deal because they'll get supplied next turn, so like, who cares? But it did remind me that we need to repair the bridge to Rowan, which actually is something that I should have done before. It was a bit of a mistake that I haven't, because now the supply goes through there. It didn't before, so we needed the Amiens connection to supply there, which we had, but it caused the problem that right now our units are unsupplied. So you want to make sure that you repair the Rowan bridge much sooner than I did. Like a retrospective tip. Because it works the way I had it, but you get this situation, right? So you don't want to have that. And then I'll move the Canadian HQ forward so we can use some of its abilities at this point. I'm also moving away my people from Le Havre because you don't really need it. And adding a supply up to make sure that my units will be supplied over there. And we finally managed to kill off the units in Brussels. Unfortunately, we can't really step there, so I'm just trying to make sure that the way I position my units mean that the enemy cannot step there either, so I'm using the zone of control and things like that to ensure of that. And I'm moving my units some more with the US ability, US HQ ability. And that's it for the turn. Now see, with the zone of control, the tank couldn't get onto the railway, which is really important. Now this is the final turn where we need to take Antwerp, which is what we're gonna do. So we're gonna be using some airstrikes first off to weaken the units there. And then we need to kind of figure out how we're moving. So the thing is, like, I could move there with the tank, but then I cannot move out because of all the zone of control things. So we gotta kind of figure out how we're gonna do it. So first I'm destroying this tank here between Brussels and Mainz. And I'm using a suppressive fire there. And I'm moving my main tank away because I know I can get 0-1 over here, which is pretty cool. Now I made that unit retreat, which means now I can move another unit closer towards Antwerp, so actually again get a hit, which is really good. Now then they moved away, so I can now step into Antwerp with my other tank, so I've taken the control here, which is quite important. Now then you're gonna need either an infantry or a tank to move towards clear the Scheldt, so you want to keep some of your units there. Alright, so then I'm moving my units around Antwerp. I'm making sure with the zone of control that they can actually take it back from me. At this point, we're going to start sort of spreading our other armies around. So we're going to be moving the Canadian and the some British units that we have up here towards Boulogne and Calais. So I'm repairing some bridges so that I can get better movement, moving the units closer so we can kind of get going on the offensive over there, because we don't have to worry about the supply line so much now because we already have Antwerp. So yeah, so I'm just moving the Canadians forward so they can finally start off with their attack. Then we're going to start picking some British army and we're going to move it down towards Luxembourg so that we can take control of Luxembourg. We do have a few turns for that, so we don't have to worry too much, but make sure that you kind of start moving in that direction. Same thing with the US, so we want to take a couple of US units. So they're probably not going to have movement on this turn, but next turn, and run towards Liège and Aachen so that we can take it over. And they take over the supply. Like I said, it happens. Here I'm trying to get towards clear the... And I took it over with the tank, so we've got that. I only have till turn 9 for this, so we actually did it a turn early, but I just want to make sure that we can get it. Then here again we gotta destroy the unit and take control of the supply, and then we're gonna move towards Legion, like I said. And make sure that you move through the supply lines so that you can keep having your unit supplied. Also make sure that you protect the Antwerp with your unit so that the enemy doesn't like accidentally step there, because that'd be really irritating. Like if you got this far and then you lost it because the enemy stepped on it, that'd be really bad. And I'm trying to sort of control the supply here. That's why I'm kind of moving down and back up with the tank. So the whole supply is mine, and even if I'm not connected to Namur, it's still going to be somewhat supplied. Here I'm trying to move towards Boulogne with my other, and towards Calais as well. With the tank I'm trying to move towards Lilla to take away their supply and to resupply myself by taking away theirs. Here I'm adding some bridges. Unfortunately I can't fix the bridge because I don't have the range of the... actually it's probably because there's an enemy on the other side. But we could repair the bridge, add more bridges at least, so as long as we can get through some way, it doesn't really matter how. So that's why I'm kind of adding the bridges, because you need to move towards Calais as well. It's not just Boulogne, so... I do want to point out on this map that mostly focus on the tactics window. Like the playthrough I'm showing you is not perfect. I do feel like this is a very mistake-prone map. I'm showing you it with the mistakes so you can see how to recover from that, but I will admit that there is probably a way you could follow the tactics a bit better. So, yeah. So just like focus on the tactics, and yeah, I'm just showing you how to handle the mistakes and etc. because yeah. I added a supply hub on Brussels. And now I'm starting to move the British HQs towards the units here because I want to make sure that I can use the abilities. I'm gonna move through the upwards because that's where we're supplied. And then the US is moving towards Legion Uncan. Alright, so we're gonna start focus with the Luxembourg, so we're gonna move down. We're gonna move our main tank towards Luxembourg and get ready to attack. And we're gonna move our infantry closer as well. I'm gonna resupply our tank. Now we could do a 1-1, but it doesn't have the best odds. Now here with Leech, you gotta remember that you also need to take Anken on turn 10. So you have essentially this turn and next turn to take 2 different cities. So here in Leech and Anken, you might want to take more risks and even like maybe less favorable odds because you really gotta hurry here. As opposed to Luxembourg, which you have time till turn 11 and it's only 1 city. So that's something to keep in mind when we're kind of deciding like, where do I want to use my airstrikes? Do I want to take 1-1s or not? Occasionally do I want to take 1-2s and things like that because it can be necessary. And I'm moving the tank towards Calais because I just want to kind of see what kind of enemies I have where. And here I realized that if I move this other unit forward I can attack, so I'm doing it. Chosen to do the 1-1 again. Probably not 100% necessary. I could probably do it without it, but I just wanted to sort of get a move on and get this. And you know that I like to do 1-1s, even though there is a reasoning that sometimes it's not necessary. But you know, as long as I'm not losing more men than I'm killing, I know this. Just a really cruel thing to say, but you know what? It's just the way it is. Now I'm gonna use my airstrikes. I'm gonna use them on the Leech because like I said, this is a lot more important. I'm always checking whether I could already attack or if I have to use the airstrike again. I've chosen to straight up attack. Got them away from Leech. Unfortunately, I can't actually step onto Leech, which is kind of funny. So they are going to get... so I'm trying to use the increased movement ability, but I still can't get there, which is really silly. But... so they're going to move someone new in there, and then we're going to have to fight them off again, which is unfortunate, but at least we sort of started moving forward, which I think was pretty nice. We're going to do the same in Luxembourg. Now we get a 0-1 attack, they're going to step back, and just like with Leech, we can move forward. So, not ideal, but, you know, at least we kind of did something. Now I'm adding some supply hubs towards the people in near Leech so that, I really don't know how to read that city properly, I'm sorry about that, to make sure that they remain supplied. I was trying to figure out a way to place the tank in a way that it could get supplied, but it's not supplied. Now I do have one naval strike, so I thought now it's time to use it. So I use it on the people in Calais because there's nowhere else when you can use it. It's not going to help you with Leisure Anken. So I was like, let's just use it over there. And the same situation, you can't step onto Calais again. A little silly, but it's fine. And they're stepping into Legion Luxembourg with other city. Calais is still empty, so we can just step in there. That's quite nice for us. But the cities that we actually care about, which is Legion Luxembourg, we're gonna have to fight for again. Okay, we can take Bologna now. We did it. So the Canadians now did everything. They got what they needed. We're done here. We're just killing off some leftover enemies, but we don't have to worry about the up top anymore. We got it. This is just me killing some leftover units while I can. But like I said, it's not very important. And then we're gonna move the tank towards Antwerp because it's very unsupplied. We want to make sure that we don't turn it into stragglers. So I'm just gonna be like that. So we kill off the people in Liège, so we're gonna move there. But remember that we also need to take over Aachen, and it has to be this turn. So actually, you don't have a break yet, right? You have to kind of hurry. So I'm trying to figure out how to move my unit so that I can A, take over Liège, but B, also get close to Aachen so I can actually do some attacks. So I have a couple options. I could use suppressive fire or feint attack. Now, suppressive fire is pointless at this point because it's not going to do much, so we're going to have to use feint attack instead. In Luxembourg, it's pretty easy. We just hit them up and move in. That's fine. And we're going to move some other infantry towards Aachen. But remember, we do have to take it this turn. So if you can only get close, it's not helpful. I'm using some airstrikes here. But it's still not enough. I'm going to use it again. Which did nothing. So at this point I'm going to use feint attacks to lower to suppress their steps. Then I move here and attack the people in Aachen with my infantry. And move forward with the tank there. And still attack them. So we've got everything now. As you'll be able to see in a second. Yeah, we got everything now. So now I'm just like killing off some leftover units. So we're going to skip over that. And I'm just going to show you the end screen. Alright, so we jumped over. Now we finished the scenario. And we got all the objectives. We also got a professional study logistics achievement. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this guide. If you did, write down in the comments. And you can also write me tips on how you would do Advanced Antwerp differently, because I feel like there might be some other tricks that you could use. And this is a fairly difficult mission, so any tips I think will be helpful to everyone. So write down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.